Welcome to the CISSP Cyber Training Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need to pass the CISSP exam the first time. Hi, my name is Sean Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to pass the CISSP exam and grow your cybersecurity knowledge. All right, let's get started. Hey, all, Sean Gerber with CISSP Cyber Training, and hope you all are having a beautifully blessed day today. Today is something new. Today we're going to try something a little bit different with the CISSP podcast based on feedback I've received from many of the people that are listening to this podcast from all over the globe. So it's the purpose of this podcast is to tie people out there in the world right now that are providing security services to the various domains that you're studying for with the CISSP. And that just kind of, it's real easy to go and study for the CISSP, but really what it comes down to is then how does that work when you're trying to tie that all together? And because of that, I have a gentleman on the call with me. He is from Secure Passage, and his name is Casey Rash. Casey, can you say hi to everybody?
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. Well, we'll get started. And the one great thing, Casey and I have a little bit of a kindred spirit. We both were former military, and I'm going to let Casey kind of go into his background a little bit, but to kind of add a little bit of color on why this is so important is the fact that I met Casey and his team at an ISC Squared meeting about 2 months ago. And this is where it kind of, this whole process came up of going, you know what? A lot of my students would love to hear about these different types of tools because I get the feedback around that. And then how does that equate specifically to the domains of study in the CISSP exam? And so hence, that is why I've got Casey here today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. Casey, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself to everybody and kind of go over your background. And then from there, we'll just kind of get into some questions.
Sounds good. Awesome.
You got the floor.
Appreciate it. Hey, so this is kind of a new endeavor for this show, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you've bit off a lot in this conversation. Secure Passage, at Secure Passage, we're doing things a little differently than the status quo would say. So this is super cool. Going to make for some great conversation.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah, I was in the Marine Corps, and of all the things that can do to a guy, it got me into the security side of things. Sometimes I say it got me into all the nerd things, right? So I was a SIGINT guy, a signals intelligence operator for the first half of my enlistment. I was active duty for 8 years, and the latter half was focused on cyber defense. And that set me up. That gave me a great background for security and figuring out how to leverage that in corporate enterprise, civilian employment. Well, that's probably a whole podcast episode itself.
Right.
So, I ended up getting on at a fintech, a financial technology company. They basically build and sell software to banks and credit unions. And I was a network security guy on that side, various types of technologies. Did that for several years. And I went to a very large trucking company and was doing virtually the same types of things, but on different technologies. And over the past 3 years, three and change, I've been on the partner side of things in pre-sales. So I work with account executives and their clients to explore their projects and their priorities and the solutions that might be viable for their situation.
Okay. So when it comes to the part, so give me, if you could, now when you started off with, you've been in a lot. So you've been in the active duty Marines, you've been in the financial sector, you've also been in the physical moving of stuff, right? Logistics aspects of this. What is the one thing that you've seen over this time? What kind of brought you to this nexus of where you're at? How have you kind of matured your career and gotten to this position?
I think I could say two things to answer that. First, having a network, that's kind of a major part. I started getting traction when I started taking serious the relationships on the table at all levels. So that's one point. And the second point was a bit more of an evolution of really figuring out what I was trying to do in security. It's such a vast field that it's okay to dance around a little bit. take different positions, try different things, and then figure out, okay, this is what I really enjoy.
Sure. No, that's
And
good.
yeah, I think that's probably critical is to accept the idea like I might land on a position for 3, 4, 5 years while I'm figuring out if it's really what I'm into.
Sure. Yeah.
For instance, I never ever thought in my life I would be involved in sales at all. But I have found it, I really enjoy it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you took so there's a couple big nuggets there before we kind of get into some of the things around what Haystack can do and secure passage. One thing that I want to reach out to all the folks that are listening, and I think this is a huge nugget that you guys really need to grab a hold of, and I'm going to point fingers at myself for not doing a good job of this, and that is building your network. And Casey, I agree with you 100% because it's those relationships that are so important, and whether you're dealing with trying to influence people to buy a product, which we talk about a lot on this program, is around influencing decision makers. Whether it's influencing it or getting sales folks, it's getting those relationships is really important, especially when you're getting in your cybersecurity career. So that's a huge nugget. I really love that.
I agree. I can't say enough about my network, and it's growing all the time. And connections that were really close when I first got out of the service aren't as close now, but I'm fond of those relationships, but as a career progresses, the network never lacks importance.
You're right, and there's an acronym we use in the military. You may know this one, but it's called HABU or HASU, and what it basically means is hook a brother or hook a sister up, and it's that whole thing of meeting people and knowing these individuals to help kind of make these things happen. And I've seen this now in my contracting world of it's not it is what you know, but it's more not what you know, but who you know is a big factor in it as well.
Big time. Totally agree.
So as we get into this, if you could explain a little bit about what you're offering, what your team offers and so forth. And I'm going to come back to that after what you mentioned around what are some of the key areas in your product and what are some of the domains. And we've talked, for everybody listening, we kind of talked a little bit about this obviously before we prepped Casey to be here, but what are just a couple of the domains that we focus on, such as maybe asset security or security operations? If you can kind of maybe tailor what your product does to those potential domains, might give the guys and gals that are listening to this maybe a better insight into how is all the stuff they're learning with the CISSP, how is that being translated into products like yours?
Yeah, so when you first spoke to me about this and told me the intention, it gave me a really good way of structuring how I personally will look at solutions going forward, bounce it against these things like the 8 domains, like where are we playing and what are our gaps. So it's interesting at Secure Passage, we're basically a 25-year-old startup.
Okay.
We have a solution in-house that has been around since the late 90s. It got really popular in 3-letter agency circles right after 9/11. We still have that solution today, and it's called Haystacks. It plays very closely to security and risk management. I'm talking about domains of CISSP now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Asset security, architectural engineering, and security assessment and testing. And I will have a caveat here on asset security. It's going to be important, whether it's this type of conversation or you're talking to a client, whatever the case may be, to define the terms, in this case, that being asset.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're wearing the cybersecurity hat, asset means a certain thing, typically,
Right.
an endpoint device.
Right.
It could be a user's laptop. It could be a data center server. And specific to Haystacks under the Secure Passage branding, asset is going to apply to anything that's critical infrastructure to your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I don't just mean critical infrastructure in the way of power or natural gas or water, those things. Those are critical infrastructure, and we can help monitor sites, properties, facilities around those things. And here's where the conversation can get interesting, because I just mentioned physical security things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the line between physical and cybersecurity is getting blurry.
Right.
Time goes on. At any rate, that was the caveat there. Asset security, relative to Haystacks isn't about end user laptops and data center servers. We don't manage those. We don't track those. It's more about property, facilities,
Right.
critical infrastructure to your organization.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, and that's actually a really great comment. And the reason I say that is I would think that that's an area that's maybe a little bit underserved. And I've got on I put the slide deck. Well, you guys can all see the video. You don't need to see. Casey's much better looking than me, but you don't need to see my ugly mug. So we didn't put that on there, but I've got his website that's out there in securepassage.com and the Haystack basically tab, and you all can go and check this out on your own. But he has in here where their Operational Intelligence Center, which is tied to Haystack. Can you kind of explain a little bit what is that Operational Intelligence Center? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's the title. That's the tagline for Haystacks.
Okay, so that's your tagline.
Yeah, it's like Haystacks, the Operational Intelligence Center.
Okay, good. So the point around that is then, as you can see where there's a couple bullets in here where they talk about OIC in action, which is your operational intelligence piece. Well, they've got monitoring security cameras, access control systems, and here's another one is social media and potential threats. All of those. If folks that have been listening, and we've talked about physical security in the past, that blurred line, many times when I work with physical security, working for this large multinational I did before, the physical guys would come to me and they go, well, how do we deal with this? And I would go, well, I don't really know. How do we deal with this? So can you kind of pull back that a little bit of where you've seen this being used and really been effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying a lot of things. I should be typing notes to speak to much faster than I am, but
you're good.
The physical guys coming to the cyber guys and saying, how do we deal with this? Well, cybersecurity, let's say TTPs, trends, tactics, procedures, and how we carry out the duties of being cybersecurity practitioners have far surpassed the like abilities in physical security. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Did
totally.
I say? Okay. So when it comes to visibility and tracking incidents, physical security systems haven't made the leaps and bounds that cybersecurity has.
Right.
So Haystacks brings a mapping system to the table where you can identify your assets of importance and you can deliver assessments according to fire code.
Okay.
Like buildings follow fire code, and certain structural properties will dictate how firefighters respond. Where are all of those kept? Typically today it's in a binder.
Right.
Well, if a building's on fire, who's going to grab that binder
and
find the page that shows a firefighter that information, right? So having a digital system where those things are tracked and kept, and being able to look on a map and tell firefighters, hey, you'll want to come from this direction and enter here, those types of things. That is a very specific example. The tool as well is being implemented today in school systems.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of regulatory compliance about what schools have to assess and report on.
Right.
So that all ties into security because school resource officers, law enforcement officers love our platform. It makes it easy to share information and not just track what's going on at the building level, but maybe a campus level.
Right.
As well as the behavioral threat analysis involved, where you can keep track of maybe at-risk students.
So let's pull on that. So is that the behavioral aspects? How does that work? You're saying potentially keep track of students. What can you kind of pull on that just a little bit for me?
Yeah, so it's common. Look, I have 3 kids, and I've sat on a school board.
Right.
Dude, I have heard everything. Nobody's kid is ever the problem, right?
Right. Yeah.
Specific to a school, the behavioral threat analysis is maybe the counselor's ability to keep some notes and the school's ability to track discipline issues as a means of carrying out some degree of profiling. I know that term comes with a negative connotation.
Right.
When it comes to school safety, what I was about to say about school safety is true for all of security. Nothing's a problem until it's a problem.
Right.
Security is not a concern until there's a problem.
Right.
So it's just another way of shifting incidents to the left a little bit and giving you more indications and warnings.
Yep. No, that's good. That's good. So, and here's a question to ask. And as we talk about the CISSP, one of the big areas we have around is privacy, and that's a big, huge factor in making sure that people are connected. How does your product and your platform deal with privacy? So if you're dealing with students and they're on this list, right? And again, profiling is not a bad thing. It's unfortunately it's a bad thing when it's used incorrectly. But you need to, if you're looking at risk mitigation, you're always sizing things up to go, okay, well, hey, I'm this guy walking down an alley in a dark night wearing all kinds of bling. That's not probably a bad idea. From a risk standpoint, somebody's profiling me saying this guy's an easy mark, right? But when it comes to the situations in this situation, you're dealing with privacy is a big factor when dealing with students. How does your platform handle that? Does it take care of that for people, or is there a different platform you'd need to use if you're going to be focused on the privacy of the students?
It's a matter of where the data is kept and who has access to the data.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, current users of Haystacks today are government entities for the most part. Mm-hmm. So we have to abide state and federal regulations when it comes to data security, which is oh my gosh, dude, that could be a whole nother podcast for you, data security. Good space there, big moving space. DSPM is the term that I'll use, data security posture management. Okay. There are several solutions there good to talk about, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit from your question and say, how does all of this apply to CISSP and cybersecurity? Yeah. Well, anybody studying cybersecurity, working in cybersecurity, is aware that attacker SOPs dictate that threats in one domain, cyber or physical, can and do impact the other. Right. Mm-hmm. So this is why we're talking about the line is blurry. Mm-hmm. And this is another reason why Secure Passage is a very interesting choice for you to bring on today, because everybody at the organization at Secure Passage has a pedigree in cybersecurity. We all come from cybersecurity backgrounds, but the owner of the company, as does he's been a founder and a entrepreneurial leader in this space for a long time. He started thinking, the gap between physical and cyber is too much risk. Mm-hmm. And so he had acquired Haystacks some years ago. I don't know all of that. Mm-hmm. And next to it, we're also developing Truman. Okay. A second in-house solution. Okay. So that's why I feel like Haystacks, although it is not a cybersecurity dedicated solution, mm-hmm. Sidebar, if you want to take a note, it's also good to know what a solution is not. Right. And that was kind of one of the next questions I had for you as well. Haystacks is not a cybersecurity dedicated solution, mm-hmm. but it is highly valuable to physical security teams, yep. Mm-hmm. and communicating across that blurry line. Right. And I think that's an important factor, because the CISSP is focused on cyber, but it's not just completely around the cyber aspects of it. We've got business continuity, disaster recovery. You have physical security, and it's one of those pieces that if you become an expert in this field, you're going to have to talk this talk. And so let's use it as an example. So the question we just had, where you're coming together with a physical product, a product that helps physical security, but as we mentioned, the lines are very blurry between that and what you would see in the cyber side. If you're a security leader, you're going to have your leadership's going to come to you and say, how do I deal with physical security? And you're going to have to know it. So it's important. I really do. I think it's important that you guys, everybody's listening to this podcast, understand it's not just you're dealing with IT stuff as a whole. You're dealing with the full gamut, and you're expected to know this information, or if not know it, at least know where to get the right answers. Right. No, I love it. And I feel like you have a great audience for me to make this comment that I'm about to make. I don't necessarily tell this to everyone, but because it's partially opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but the more I've studied what we're doing at Secure Passage and how we're impacting the market and addressing these gaps between physical and cybersecurity, mostly because it's just different teams that have traditionally never worked together. I
Right.
get it. I'm not dogging that in any organization. It's just the state that it has been.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I study and read and research and talk to CISOs and security leaders, I'm comfortable saying that most of the responsibility when it comes to unifying systems for security outcomes lies on the cyber side,
Mm-hmm.
because we understand the data.
Right.
We know how to leverage data.
Right.
Physical security teams don't care about it. They don't really have to. But the technologies and the systems in place on the physical side produce data relative to security outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Truman comes in. And I don't know if you're looked at on your website.
Yeah.
But the tagline there is physical detection and response.
Right.
Calling it PDR.
Mm-hmm.
That should start to ring some bells with cybersecurity practitioners, because
Mm-hmm.
we're familiar with all the DR acronyms, EDR, MDR, what have you.
Right.
We're basically applying those traditionally cybersecurity principles to physical security systems.
Nice.
Things like, a smoke detector isn't just a smoke detector anymore.
Right.
They are IoT.
Mm-hmm.
That produce dozens of different types of detections. They can detect smoke. They can tell if it's smoke from a vape. They can tell if it's got THC in it, which is really good for high school bathrooms.
Good point.
They can detect raised noise levels, be it just an excited classroom because they're doing a lab or something, or somebody yelling for help,
Right.
or a gunshot.
Right.
So and those are just a few examples. You can go look up like Halo environmental sensors
Mm-hmm.
and read about all the detections they do.
Mm-hmm.
There are numerous brands out there, but that all of those detections produce logs. And so unless somebody is watching their Halo system, which corporate enterprises, schools, it's just hard to staff everything, right? That's why AI and automation is so popular right now, because human capital we need people to actually be able to do their job, not sit in front and watch for alerts all day.
Right.
We talk about with that with our cyber SOC people, like they're just 24/7 eyes on glass.
Right.
Well, that's great, but we have AI and automation now.
Right.
So if we aren't leveraging these technologies to make security faster and better, we're not rolling, right? We're not keeping up. So at any rate, Truman can collect those logs as well as logs from surveillance systems, because cameras just aren't cameras anymore. They, just like the environmental sensors, they do dozens of detections based off what they see. So people carrying objects, a crowd amassing, or license plate readers, facial recognition. This all produces data. There are numerous other types of traditionally physical security devices that fall in the IoT category,
Right.
that produce data. And that's what Truman is doing, is taking that data and creating a better security picture, holistic security.
Nice.
So
Nice.
let's say you're a security director, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you got to fire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got HR in the room with you, and you call somebody in, and this person gets irate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not happy. So if an environmental sensor picks up elevated voices, and you have an AI and automated system to create an alert,
Right.
and somebody says, oh, that's coming from the room over there where they're talking to so-and-so. Now, all of a sudden, that guy might not just be a physical security risk, but he's also at risk of being an insider threat.
Right.
So let's go ahead and terminate his access.
Right.
Now it's an identity and access management issue.
Correct.
So just because somebody in the office wasn't happy,
Right.
we see how this, again, the line gets blurry.
Right.
So,
well, and I think this is really important because if anybody's had to deal with, and this actually was a really good use case, if you've had to deal with employees, they've had situations where I should say, I'll just point at me. I've had to let people go, and it's very uncomfortable for everybody in the room. And this is a great point of if there's sensors listening to these types of things, how does that blend into the physical security space? And I think that's an important part of areas that we don't talk about a lot. We've talked about it in the CISSP and the podcast where IoT is a huge factor. Everything is listening. I mean, we all have the Alexas and the Siris and all these different things that are going on at home that are listening to all types of aspects. But it's also, to your point, around just even fire suppression systems that have sensors. What are they listening to? What are they not listening to? And I think it's all about the data. It's always all about the data. And having tools like yours that can help kind of, especially with I use AI loosely, but it's basically to the point where all the data is being aggregated through these very fast algorithms that can figure out what is actually occurring. And I think it's an important factor, especially as you mentioned, there isn't enough people to go through this. And from a fulfillment standpoint, it isn't what people want to do is just sit there and watch logs all day. It's just not fun. So.
Right.
So we've got, I want to keep us on time as far as how much we've got with us, and just because I've got a few more questions and I want to make sure that we get all those covered. With your tool, what are some things though that it doesn't do? So one thing I always talk to all contractors and people that are coming in that are offering up a service, and is that when I get very concerned when someone comes in and tells me it can do everything, it's the Swiss Army knife to all things that you ever could want, I usually run away very quickly because I have yet to see one where that's actually the case. So I'm going to kind of throw it out there with you and just ask Casey, what are some things that your tools just don't do well? They may do it, but they just don't do it well, or they don't do it at all.
Yeah, no, great question. I love that question. Being a solutions architect in pre-sales for a few years now, you are striking a chord. I love it. You hear it from every security vendor. Oh yeah, we can do it all.
Right.
So Haystacks, I'm just going to hit on assets.
Okay.
It doesn't do automated asset aggregation.
Okay.
There are some asset management tools for IT that will do automatic inventory. It'll go out and sniff and tell you what's on the network. Well, Haystacks doesn't do that because a lot of times the assets that we help organizations track don't have as much of a digital footprint, or it might be such that it changes and has to be updated, so it doesn't do any good to have an automated system. So when we talk about asset management for Haystacks, we're not like an IT asset management solution.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that at all. When it comes to Truman and physical detection and response, today we don't do automated remediation of anything just by the nature of being a physical security detection and response solution. So all the response will be on the organization's end to leverage the data. We can build detections and workflows, but the tool doesn't actually remediate any of those that come up.
Right.
It's all tunable, and I'm going to make a correlation here that I really don't make except for with cybersecurity people, but we're all familiar with SIM and SOAR, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what's happening with Truman, but with data from physical security systems.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Totally.
So, yeah, it seems like once it's explained, it's like, how's this not already being done everywhere? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and that again, it comes down to the need, right? And I think that I'll just use an example of I'm doing some consulting stuff for financial companies right now, and some very large financial companies, and they've got money, they've got resources to make things happen. But I've also was the CISO for manufacturing, and some of my partners that I'm working with at Next Peak made a comment to me going, well, the manufacturing space is growing, but they don't need cybersecurity the same as they do in the financial industry. And they do, And in many cases, right, the stuff that can happen in manufacturing can kill people, whereas the financial, it just devastates them financially. But the ultimate goal is there's money there in the banking industry, so therefore there's lots of traction. Outside of the banking industry, it's growing. All areas are growing, including, I believe, in the physical side, because they see it more and more almost every day. But it's just, it doesn't have the level of traction yet but it will. It just takes time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I missed earlier when I mentioned Truman, mapping Truman to CISSP domains.
Yeah.
The most applicable domain would be security operations.
Okay. Yep, and that makes sense.
Bearing in mind by leveraging data from physical security solutions.
Right.
So there's also an identity and access management piece for us internally that is a roadmap item, but we're working toward being able to tie whatever detections, if you're a client, Sean, and we've developed your use cases and built detections with you for your particular use cases, we want to be able to tie an identity to every detection, whether it's human or non-human.
Right.
Actually, it's probably a topic in the CISSP, in the IAM domain. Most identities in cybersecurity today are not human.
Right.
And it's a staggering number. I read about it recently. I don't remember what it is, but it's like 10 to 1 non-human identities to human. So when I read that, I thought, well, everybody says Macs are more secure than PCs.
Right.
But why is that?
Right.
So because there's fewer Macs. Most people just use a PC.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
So that makes them more vulnerable because there's more of them out there. Well, let's look at identity through that lens. What's more risky, a human identity or a non-human identity?
Right.
If non-human identities outnumber human identities 10 to 1, I kind of need to have something going on to monitor my non-human identities.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, totally. And we all know the non-human ones are much easier to provision, and they also get forgotten about, and they become the bane of most security leaders' existence, just trying to have to deal with all that. So yeah, no, that makes total sense. Well, we're getting close on time, and I wanted to be cognizant of your time as well as what we're trying to accomplish here. But in the last few minutes, if you could, Casey, kind of just explain to the team, the folks that are listening to this, what are some things they need to take away and know around what your product does, but also around how it can benefit them for the CISSP exam.
We are a breath of fresh air when it comes to various solutions, and I realize I'm saying that out of some degree of partiality.
Sure.
But I'm also saying it out of years of being dedicated to cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're addressing things that just because of status quo aren't being addressed by other solutions.
Sure.
I'll use a word that, as an organization, as Secure Passage, we're trying not to use this word because it's just too buzzy. Converged security.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, but if you ask anybody to define that, you'll get a bunch of different answers.
Right.
A lot of people will just say OT or IoT, and it's
right.
like, sure, correct. But when you go look at frameworks that assess converged security, whether it's OT or IoT, they're just looking at cybersecurity controls
right.
around those environments.
Right.
They're looking at how that data is being used.
Right. Right.
That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. And I think that to kind of just peel that up a little bit or peel it back is that it always comes back to the data. And I feel that as we are, whatever product you are, as a security professional who's listening to the podcast, whatever resource or whatever tool you look at, consider it's about the data. Where's the data being stored? How is the data being managed? And in the case of this, where you have physical devices that, such as, security cameras and other types of alarm systems, where is that data going and how are you protecting it and managing it as well? So I think the ultimate goal is just to kind of come back to is that it doesn't matter if you you think it's and don't take offense to this, Casey, but if it's a dumb camera, it's not a dumb camera. These cameras in today, as you have mentioned, they have AI built into them. They're collecting data, they're storing data. As a security professional, you need to be connected with all of these things and where the data is being stored and where it's being transported to.
Yeah, you're dead on. And maybe some of your listeners will be in a position to help achieve the next level of essentially holistic security awareness at the leadership level. Because if you talk to CISOs today, it's a crapshoot of who's managing physical security. It might be, well, technically it's mine, but I don't have anything to do with it because so and so and so and so.
Yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on.
Or it's a totally different team and they don't want to talk to cyber at all.
Right.
Well,
right.
At some point, somebody has to take ownership.
Right. Yeah, it's the guys with guns sometimes don't want to, and they don't want to know it, and you get it. So, no, this makes total sense, Casey. I really appreciate your time with me today, and I hope everybody that has been listening to the podcast you can reach out to me at CISSP Cyber Training, and I'm happy to pass on the information about Casey and his team. You can go to securepassage.com. That's securepassage, all one word, .com, and you can check out what they have there as well. So, and I know we'll put in the show notes, we'll put Casey's contact information, so you'll have that. But at the end of the day, we want to try to teach you this stuff at CISSP Cyber Training and give you the tools you need to be successful and so you can pass the exam the first time. So any last thing you want to say at all, Casey?
No, man, I really appreciate you having me. I think this is a really cool way to leverage your show. It speaks to the feedback you got too, that CISSP covers a lot of things, but solutions that fall into each of those domains, that's a really good concept of viewing the CISSP domains, is what solutions apply where.
Awesome.
This is very good.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you. Well, and I just appreciate you taking the time because, again, time is money and time is valuable, and taking the time to spend with us is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much, and we're very, very excited for your future. But other than that, that's all I've got for you all today. And if you have any questions, again, reach out to me at CISSPcybertraining.com or reach out to Casey at securepassage.com. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you all on the flip side. See ya. Hey, thanks again for listening today. It's been my pleasure to prep you for the CISSP exam. Are you interested, though, in some free CISSP exam questions? Head on over to freecisspquestions.com and sign up to join my email list, and you'll receive access for 60 free CISSP questions each and every month for the next 6 months. That's a total of 360 questions just for signing up with CISSP Cyber Training. You'll also gain access to other free CISSP resources, so just head on over to freecisspquestions.com and sign up, or head on over to CISSPcybertraining.com and sign up today. Have a wonderful day, and we will catch you on the flip side. See ya.